Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV in Mississippi, not just any place in Mississippi. We are here on the site of where the story of a 14-year-old African American young man who was visiting Mississippi was brutally murdered. And I am here with the mayor. We're in Glendora, Mississippi. I'm here in the museum, the Emmett Till Museum, and with the mayor of Glendora, Johnny B. Thomas, who has lived this story his entire life and lived it from a perspective that many of us cannot even imagine. His father was implicated as one of the African American men who were involved. There were 5 men. Well, first of all, Mayor, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today and then to share this very intimate story that I can't imagine how you've lived and having to deal with this your entire life. And now you have this museum here that you are a part of helping to keep the story alive. So first, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Pamela, for having us and visiting our site here. We certainly appreciate your effort. And of course, we are off the beaten path, and not often we find people such as yourself finding us. So we're certainly tickled to death that you all found us. And as you say, this community here is one of those communities that have really suffered over a period of time. And we are a 119 years old community. Now, the newest all African American community.
It is all African American.
Yes.
And you are the mayor.
I'm the mayor, first elected. Actually, I'm the first African American to be elected in an office in this county.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, in 1975. And I'm now currently serving as mayor. That tenure began in '82.
So, Mayor Johnny B. Thomas, your father, I mean, of course, you know, the brutal murder of Emmett Till here was what the nation saw that helped to spark the drive that something had to be done, that we could not continue treating people the way that this 14-year-old was treated for any reason, regardless of what he was accused of. You have been a part of this your entire life. You were a year old when Emmett Till was killed?
I was a year, 8 months, and 28 days old on the kidnapping date.
And so do you recall at what point you understood the significance of this murder and then the fact that your father was implicated, a black man was implicated in this murder? Do you remember that?
Well, that's probably the first that I do remember of it, because me, myself, being one of those young men that was pretty much brought up on the streets, as they call it, got my education from the streets, and as a result, I often heard that my father was, whenever he made it home, and I think he originally came back home in 1961, after being gone since '55. And all I can remember hearing is that there's that low-down so-and-so that had to do with the killing of that kid, Emmett Till. And so I've heard that all of my life from very young age, practically every year, because my father would come home after that pretty much religiously every year.
So he left in 1955. Emmett Till, 56. Emmett Till was killed in 55.
Yes.
And so your father left. And what were your thoughts then? I mean, did you understand the significance of this murder? Because you were growing up in Mississippi where there was brutality happening on a regular basis. What was that like for you?
Well, at that age, I wasn't really thinking about it. And like I said, when he came back home and I really started hearing about the Emmett Till murder, I was about 8 years old. So that's when the significance of what was happening would take place, because I was always at this juke joint, and everybody visited this juke joint in Glendora, and so I just heard everything and knew it all.
We're talking to Mayor Johnny B. Thomas. He is the mayor of Glendora, Mississippi, and he runs this museum here this museum that's trying to keep the story of the 14-year-old Emmett Till alive. Emmett Till will be frozen in our memory as the 14-year-old who was brutally murdered because he was accused of whistling at a white woman. But today, talking about living here in this area and your father, a man who was the same color as as Emmett Till, how was that for your mother? Did you ever have conversations with your mother about it?
Well, my mother, I found out 50 years later, she was in a book. So she did speak out on it. She was in a book, the Lynching of Emmett Till book that I received 50 years later, and saw that she talked about how even she would be beaten if she was ill and couldn't go to the field by those same peoples that murdered Emmett.
She would be beaten?
That's what she said in her book, in the Lynching of Emmett Till book, that she was afraid to even talk about this story because the fact that she feared that and knew that Milam would beat them if they were sick and couldn't go to the field. So yes, this situation has been bad around this place, but my mom, as far as talking about it, that's it. She talked about it in that book.
But she never talked to you about it.
I've not talked to her about it. We talked about it.
So
but
your mom is
it
still
was
alive?
just no, she's passed away.
Okay.
But she was always quiet about that. It just was a quiet thing in this community. Pretty much like it is now, other than what we decided to do to keep the legacy alive. Had we not, it would be as quiet as we sell church mice.
So, Mayor, there were other black men who were forced to be a part of the Emmett Till murder. Or you just tell me, how many more men were allegedly involved?
Well, it's alleged that there was 5 other African Americans that was involved in this act. Henry Lee Loggins, Joe Willie Hubbard, Too Tight Collins, Otha Wallace, Odie Brown. Those are 5 men from this community that they made to participate in that act. But they're now being called accomplices. All of them are deceased, but they were still called accomplices. My father was called an accomplice before he passed away, which prompted me to ask the district attorney to consider granting immunity to those black men because they had no choice but to participate if they were ordered to, or receive the same fate as Emmett. As far as I'm concerned, I think they received a worse fate than Emmett because Emmett was gone. My father lived 50 plus years, almost 50 years. Well, 50, 2009, yeah, 54 years of death, knowing and seeing and being a part of that heinous act. So I say that they died along with Emmett, but had to suffer the longevity of the murder of Emmett.
When you had the conversation with your father and looking in his face, at what point did you feel comfortable enough saying, "Daddy, did you do it"?
Well, I felt comfortable enough to do it. As I said, I'm the very last person to to interview my father before he passed away in trying to get the district attorney to grant the immunity. But I could see the fear, just as with the other young man that I interviewed that heard the beating and the hollering and the crying for his mother of Emmett. When we interviewed him, we could see that same fear, and just like it was yesterday, in their eyes. And my father, along with Willie Reed, who testified that what he heard on Sunday morning. And of course, I think he also testified that he probably saw my father on the truck when they took Emmett to Sunflower County. That's a count that we don't know if it's accurate, because some say that my father was with the murderers when they went to take the child for money, but when they kidnapped him, they brought him straight here to Glendora, where he received his very first beating. And my father got away and they got other African Americans to participate, and was probably on that truck when they went to Sunflower County, and came back here and engaged my father a second time, I see, in trying to dispose of the body.
So, what was it? We're talking to the mayor of Glendora, Mississippi. We are in the Emmett Till Museum, the center here in Glendora, that is working to keep the Emmett Till story alive. Um, when you do you recall what your feelings were when you were thinking about, I'm going to ask Daddy about this?
Well, I was didn't have any thoughts about it.
How old were
What
you?
I what well in 2000, what is that, 8 7 that
So,
I interviewed him. So
okay.
I'm
But
I'm,
had you
I'm
talked
a
to him?
grown.
Had you talked to him before about it?
Oh, well, no.
So,
The reason I talked with him about it was the accomplice, and that meant that if he was an accomplice, that he could be arrested. And I did not want to see that because I knew that under the duress that those men were, there was no way that they could not or wouldn't have had to participate or to do what they was told to do. So that's when I talked to my father about it. The first time that I talked with him about it, because of that fear of him being incarcerated for something that was pretty much covered up.
so they were not a part of the trial.
They were not a part of the trial. Had they been a part of the trial, the reason I say the story was covered up because they took those men and locked them up and prevented them from testifying.
So those 5 men were locked up in jail and were not even subpoenaed.
Well, one of them they kept in jail because he drove the truck for J.W. Milam every day at a store here in town. So he hauled the groceries back and
And
forth.
tell people who J.W. Milam was.
J.W. Milam is the admitted murderer that for $4,000 to Look magazine tell a story, I think to benefit them because the fact that they did not include or say anything about the African Americans that was made to participate.
And it,
Had they,
okay, go ahead.
had they, that would have prevented the double jeopardy that they wound up being freed on and just let go without any repercussion.
You being a part of this your entire life, how has that impacted you and operating still in Mississippi Delta, where there are still things that go on?
Well, I tell you, it's impacted me mostly because of I've been an advocate all of my life for change of the conditions that African Americans live in, and that's why I first ran for office. But I guess they said it turned me into a radical. I think the white community pretty much have me as a radical because of my wanting to try and afford change in our conditions that we were living in, which haven't done too much this day, but we're living in a county here that pretty much an apartheid type of situation where we have 70% African Americans and the 30% run everything. So elected gerrymandering, the whole 9 yards. So the conditions haven't changed. This thing affected me. I guess it gave me as a different class. I like to say class. I use class because I'm not that educated individual. I'm pretty much, my education is from the streets here. And that might be the reason that they call me a radical, because I'm not trained to, I guess, to be submissive.
So this case is being reopened?
It is reopened.
The case, the Emmett Till murder case, has been reopened with the intent of implicating the black men who were allegedly involved?
Well, it implicated them as accomplices, but then I think the revelation, most recent reopen, was the revelation of Mrs. Bryant who acknowledged that she pretty much, under duress, as I say, told a lie on the stand, the witness stand, I guess to protect herself. I would say it was to protect herself because she probably was under the same duress as those African Americans.
And where does she live now?
I believe she's in North Carolina somewhere. Yeah.
And so, what's happening with the case right now? Where are things?
Well, I think they're looking at her for trying to prosecute. I don't see how, but and I would hope that they wouldn't, because it's just another farce. I don't see how they could do it without having any witnesses. Plus the fact that they won't look at Jim Crow. I say Jim Crow has to be looked at very, very careful, because that is the culprit in this entire act, Jim Crow, the harshness of Jim Crow. And the African Americans, accomplices. I say yes, they was accomplices, but and the reason they were accomplices because of the fact they had to try to feed the family. You know, some of us was treated a little better than others. Some of us was given a little more than others so that they could control you more than others. So that is why I say the accomplice. Yes, I say my father was accomplished, but you know, J.W. took care of him better than any of the other African Americans around. He pretty much had, back then, big thing was womanizing. I mean, you know, you had money in your pocket, you had all the women you want, and it was just a crazy situation that they put us in. But that made African Americans pretty much be or do whatever they say.
Another form of slavery.
Another form of slavery.
Where are things now, Mayor Johnny B. Thomas, here in Glendora? We are days away from 2020. How do you see things in Glendora compared to what they were in 1955 when this action took place?
Well, I'm hoping that, and we created this museum here with the hope of beginning the healing. Our mission is healing here, not to be provocative, but the healing should begin from this community because of the premeditation that took place here in this community. Rosa Parks said that she wasn't tired on the day they ordered her to go to the back of the bus, but she thought about what they did to this kid in Mississippi, Emmett Till, and she froze. My thing is to show the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to create a dialogue surrounding this heinous act of lynching of Emmett Till. And today began the healing, and to get young folks back engaged. I would hope that young white folks would get back engaged toward healing as they did in '64 and so on when we created the civil rights movement and all of that. They made a difference. I think they could make a difference in the healing.
So you have a monument to Emmett Till that has been vandalized repeatedly by people in this community today. How does that healing, how do you reach those people who feel like just the memorial to Emmett Till still needs to be shot up and vandalized?
Yeah, well, so that's the fight that we have. It is continuing to be a problem. We've had 3 memorials destroyed. One drowned, thrown into the Tallahatchie, they say.
The same place where Emmett Till's body was thrown?
Same place pretty much where Emmett's body was thrown or pulled from. We say it was pulled from the mouth of the Black Bayou because that's where the body was dropped. But now I can't see a whole bunch of difference. The last public media on the vandalism of the Emmett Till sign had to do with 3 young men posing with high-powered AK-47 or whatever they were at the sign after it had been shot up. which was a quarter mile from our museum here, right across the bayou from our museum. And one of the young men that was posing uh, was from, family was from this community. As a matter of fact, his great-grandfather was the second mayor of the town of Glendora. And his grandfather was the last owner of this facility here that was used as a cotton gin. So that.
So some generational racism that's continuing today.
Yeah, it's alleged that the grandfather was the uh, head of the citizen council back then in this area.
Is that a code name?
Citizen council, yeah, it's similar to Klansman, but with the suit on and the tie and no cover over the head.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so there.
Has this museum been vandalized?
It has not been vandalized, other than maybe we've gotten some long distance damage to it from shots. Like I said, the shooting of the sign is just a quarter of a mile away from here. And those guns go 2 miles.
Hmm.
So they could very easily knock holes in whatever we have here, this
Well,
metal.
yeah, Mayor, my cousins Ethel and Beverly and I came up from Jackson, Mississippi to come through this museum. How do you encourage other people who visit Mississippi or the residents who live here in Mississippi? Why is it significant that they come here to the Emmett Till Center?
Well, this story should be always remembered. If we don't remember it, we're certainly bound to repeat the situation that have happened here. So that is why I try to work with the school system and our universities to get them to come to our community here and to go through this museum and to help us to organize and to get other individuals involved and to come out to see what we have here and to help us to make it better.
Yeah. One last question. What happened with Emmett Till, how does that impact, and you're living this every day of your life, that you have a recollection, how, when you see the other police brutality and what has happened in other communities around the country, when you're watching that, how do you see that? How do you see that?
Well, I'm directly just 10 days after Ferguson. I'm traveling to Clarksdale, Mayor, since '82, 30 miles from Clarksdale, all of my life, and I'm stopped by 10 or 15 highway patrolmen in Clarksdale and order me to get out of the vehicle. I say, what's the matter, officer? Get out the truck. I said, get on the ground. I said, get on the ground. I said, I'm the mayor of the town of Glendora. We don't care who you are. Get on the ground. Made me lie in the middle of the highway.
What?
Just 10 days after this Ferguson piece. And you can imagine what I'm thinking now. I said, and being the radical they say I've been, I'm imagining that that's it for me. Because get on the ground, I say, I'm the mayor. 3 times, and they say, we don't care, get on the ground. And so that situation is continuing to be now. So it's not.
How did it end? What happened?
Well, it ended. They just let me go. I had a young man in the car with me that had been on probation, and he didn't meet his probation, but he was working for me here in the town, and they came after him. And
so why didn't they just get him instead of making you lie face down?
Well, what they did was that the constable here, they was this close to this boy all the morning, could have gotten him any time, close as we are, and they didn't get him. I think it was purposely left there so that the constable could call a deputy sheriff. Deputy sheriff called Clarksdale and told him that I was aiding and abetting a felony.
Did you go to jail?
No.
Did you
didn't
charges?
Didn't get no charges, anything.
But humiliation.
Humiliation. And of course, we've had a whole bunch of problems around here. We got this railroad out here been coming through town since 1888, and they stopped paying us taxes in what is that, 73? Owed us 44 years of taxes, and they've not paid us. We've had to go to court. Actually, they sued me not to pay it.
What railroad is it?
Illinois Central. I mean, right now it's Canadian National. It's a Canadian railroad.
Mm-hmm.
It belonged to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're trying to fight that, and of course, to no avail. And we've been an advocate around here a whole 48 years, and have helped to elect every political person of color in our community here. We have 3 African American chancery judges
Wow.
that can't seem to be able to ask pertinent questions to clear this situation with the railroad. And they've just gone and decided with the railroad and just left a community in disarray and allowed the community to lose everything. Of course, I don't blame it all on the railroad. I do blame it on some of the black elected officials that we have in the county here, because that's who was in charge of it. We had a black tax assessor who made our records up and deliberately left out the largest tax contributor to the town.
Wow.
Left it out for 40 plus years. And she was there all the time, and now she's in full charge of it and left it out for 21 years under her tenure.
Wow.
So I'm thinking about suing, and I hate to sue, but she's black, and but I'm thinking I've got to sue.
We are talking to the son of one of the African American men who allegedly was involved with the brutal murder of Emmett Till in 1955. There is a museum here in Glendora, Mississippi, and we're talking to the mayor. He's getting a phone call, but we're going to let you go. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and we thank you all so much for watching us. If you want to, do you have a website or anything?
We do. GlendoraMS.com.
GlendoraMS.com if you want to learn more about this museum and put it on your schedule if you're in this part of the country. Certainly, and you have a book. People can order your book. What's the name of your book?
A Stone of Hope, Rising Above Slavery, Jim Crow, and Poverty in Glendora, Mississippi.
Not unlike many rural communities in Mississippi, facing some of the same things that they faced in 1955. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. I thank you all so much for watching. Here's the book. Oh, thank you so much. Beverly has the book that we're going to show you the book. This is the book that you can order. Is it on Amazon?
Well, we ordered them from here. We're doing, we sell our own here because we're trying to contribute at least 10% of our book sale to a scholarship fund in honor of my wife who recently passed. Well, not recently, but in 2017, we set up a scholarship fund in her honor to try to educate our 60-70% youth in the community.
Excellent, excellent. The website again is GlendoraMS.com. GlendoraMS.com. I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV in Glendora, Mississippi. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share. We'll see you next time. Don't forget, there is healing at the well.